Welcome to our April show and tell. We have a very exciting slate for you today. So today is our South by Southwest edition. But before we dive in, just a little bit of housekeeping. As always, we love to keep this super conversational. We also really love to hear from all of you. We love to hear your questions, your feedback, just kind of everything you're thinking as we go through the session. So just make sure that down at your chat bar that everything is turned to everyone so that everyone besides just the host and the panelists can hear all of your feedback in the chat. And then as a reminder, we will be sharing the recording of today's session so you won't miss anything and you'll get all of the links and you'll get just a reminder and a refresher of today's session. And that's pretty much all of the feedback. We don't have anything for marketing. So we do have extra time to hear from today's amazing panel, and we do have a special guest. So I will be handing it straight over to that. I will first hand it over to Navara if you want to introduce our special guest for today.
Yeah, hi everyone. So the three of us on the team attended South by Southwest in Austin a few weeks ago. So we're each going to present some of our highlights today. And as Hallie said, we have a special guest joining us on the call today who was one of my highlights. So we just put up our South by Southwest recap on the site. It's in the culture section if you take a look. And on that recap, we have a page all about neuroscience. I feel like there are just so many more and more neuroscience talks, I feel like every year, which maybe our guests can also speak to. But it used to be, I think, that having the word trends in the title of your talk would draw an immediate crowd. But now I think science is kind of giving it a run. Like, for example, we're seeing like the science of attention, consumer science, all these talks like revolving around science. And I think, everyone is so used to filtering themselves now because of online media and all that. And I think, because of that, more companies are employing scientific methods to try to understand people on a truer level. I don't know, maybe people have always lied about their true feelings, but we just have the science and the tools to kind of sniff that out now. But anyways, our guest today can speak to a little bit more of this. I'm really thrilled that she's joining us today. This is one of my favorite talks at South by. We feel very lucky to have her on here today. Dr. Heather Collins, she presented work that feels particularly relevant to what we do. Dr. Collins, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, hi. I am Dr. Heather Collins, and I have my PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and I'm an expert on how people learn, remember, perceive, and think about things. And so my life has been spent in academia doing research on brain function and how the brain processes information. I'm also a professional keynote speaker, so I actually go around to organizations, companies, conferences, like South by Southwest and many others, and share how neuroscience can reach out and touch the lives of people where they are, and how organizations can take advantage of neuroscience to help them do exactly what they want to do, but better and more reliably and more effectively.
So Dr. Collins presented her talk around the neuroscience of fashion and style. And I'm actually curious to know how what brought you into this direction in applying your studies to fashion.
Yeah, I'm always been interested in how people work, what drives us to do what we want to do. And one of the key ways we do that is by how we present ourselves to other people. And in particular, I'm a shoe girl. I love shoes. And there's one shoe company I absolutely love. They're the only shoes I wear on stage, called Fluvog. And I bought my first pair when I was in graduate school, and I was defending my doctoral dissertation, and I really wanted something to wear on my feet to ground me in the area I was standing that would make me feel confident and empowered and bold. And those shoes did that. And those shoes still do. This is my latest pair I'm in love with. that I wore at South by Southwest. And they even have messages on them that help remind me of why I love them. Like these say fight strong. So this became a way for me to connect with fashion and really apply neuroscience to fashion in that we perceive people right away within 100 milliseconds. And so it's how is our brain processing what it sees before we even hear somebody talk, before we even meet them? How do we even perceive that? And I see what are the name of those shoes? It's the designer is John Fluvog, Fluevog. They're based out of Vancouver, Canada. And so you might have your own, favorite pair of shoes or your favorite top or your favorite bracelet or something that anchors you to how you want to be seen. And I became really interested in how we can apply neuroscience to how we perceive other people and how we make an impression on other people and how we understand how others really see us from the outside in when they see that first impression and make that judgment within 100 milliseconds.
So at the center of your thesis is this scale, which Hallie, can you bring up the slide so everyone can get a visual of what this scale looks like, where I feel like you really laid it out very clearly. Can you tell us a little bit about this model and what it means and what we're seeing right here?
Yeah, so this is my model I developed to help us all understand how our brains perceive fashion and clothing and appearance. And it's how aesthetic signals like this shape prediction, cognitive load, and memory in particular, which are really important to how we think about somebody and how we decide to trust them or not trust them or attribute credibility or not. And at the top, you'll see a scale from fluency to distinctiveness. And if you're on the fluency side of the scale, that means you're leaning into being predictable, to being easy to process, to blending in with your environment. And that might not just be your physical environment, that might be the cultural environment you're in, the type of work environment you're in. So if you're an office worker, you might dress one way. If you're in banking, you might dress in signals that lend you credibility for that area. If you're an influencer, you're going to dress in a different way. Um, so if you're leaning toward the fluency end of things, it's very predictable, very familiar, very fast, very easy to process. And if you're leaning into distinctiveness on the other side, that means it's all about standing out. And distinctiveness means that you're going to catch the eye right away. And so these are high signals being sent. There's a lot of novelty involved. And I talk about these specifically with respect to three cognitive processes that are very important for how our brain decides to evaluate whether or not we want to work with somebody, whether we're trusting somebody, how much we like somebody. And the first one is prediction, because your brain is a prediction machine. So at Future Snoops, you probably know that it's all about trying to anticipate what's going to happen next. And that's exactly what our brain is built for. Our brains are prediction machines. So if you're leaning into fluency, that's what we call a fast schema match. That is, you can immediately identify that that person is who they say they are, that they're doing what they say they're doing. You're really quick to attribute credibility and authority based on how they blend in. It's easy to see that somebody who's dressed in a traditional suit, for example, might be some kind of executive or in some kind of like structured job position in, banking, finance, might be an accountant, something like that. Uh, and on the other end, with distinctiveness, your brain has to constantly work to update. So rather than it being fast for you to evaluate somebody, it's slow because they don't quite fit in with any of the schemas or expectations that your brain have. So you really have to pause, maybe ask some questions internally, probably, maybe externally, who knows, and think about, well, what do I know about this person? What are they what are they wearing? Are they standing in? Are they standing out? So there's uncertainty there, and there's a lot of learning. And it takes a little bit longer to be able to assess somebody's credibility, authority, legitimacy, things like that. The next factor we want to consider is cognitive load. And cognitive load, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. It's simply how much information your brain can process at one time. And when we look at fluency, if you're blending in, there's more efficient processing. That is, there's low mental demand. So rather than spending your brain's cognitive load thinking about, can I trust this person? Should I listen to what this person has to say? You automatically believe that, go with that, and then move on and allocate your brain's resources to other things. Maybe you've assessed that this person's going to be a good partner for your project, and so you can move on to actually talking about the project really quickly. With distinctiveness, it's the opposite. So distinctiveness is going to be really high on cognitive load, might even cause cognitive overload. That is too much information for your brain to process at once. Might cause your brain to shut down a little bit when that cognitive overload happens. So there's a higher mental demand there because it's less predictable and you have to spend more mental energy figuring out what's going on and what's happening. And the last one we want to consider is memory and capacity. So, memory is sort of the gateway that allows everything else to happen in your brain. It's really fundamental for everything else that our brain does as far as intense cognitive processing is concerned. And the key there is when it comes to fluency, it's going to be lower salience. That is, nothing kind of stands out and more forgettable. So if somebody's kind of blending in, they're going to be a little bit more forgettable. Uh, on, but that does leave you with higher capacity. On the other side, they're going to be with distinctiveness, a lot of salience. That means they're going to be more memorable because your brain is going to pay more attention to figure out what's going on. And so you've probably one of the things that I talk about with this, one of the biggest examples that's easy for everybody to remember is the 2010 Video Music Awards. Lady Gaga wore a meat dress. And even if you didn't watch it live, you probably heard about it and have seen videos or images or whatever. And everybody remembers what she was wearing that year, and nobody remembers what anybody else was wearing that year. So this is a really extreme example of leaning into distinctiveness. People remember it, but also there was not a lot of prediction available because it was like, what is she wearing? What's happening? The cognitive load was really high. Is that a dress? What is considered a dress? What is considered clothing? Can clothing be made of meat? And there were a lot of questions you were asking, like, wow, is that really going to last all night? What's that going to smell like at the end of the night? What is it going to stay on her body even? Did it have to be sewn onto her? How is she actually wearing it? So that's a really extreme example of leaning into distinctiveness really hard.
Yeah,
And I think
I think
it's
you have a really great quote from your presentation that I noted, which was the brain judges what is easy to understand as more beautiful, true, and trustworthy, which I think it's interesting that you said that most people actually live on the fluency side. We lean towards the familiar, but that stands so at odds with where the fashion industry sits, which is, I think a lot of us are in the business because we want to be creative, we want to make new things. Our team is constantly talking about novelty or like how to evolve things. It's all about reinvention, and also standing out. Actually, Hallie, if you want to move on to the next slide, um, and then the next one. But it's like you said, it's also about it's also about survival. We kind of feel like we need to stand out on the sales floor. So how do you think we negotiate this consumer maybe preference for fluency or what's familiar versus I think this innate desire we have within the industry to show distinctiveness?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that within the industry, there are fashion is a multifaceted industry, and one of those facets is fashion as art. And so that's always going to have its place. And fashion as art can really push the boundaries of distinctiveness and really make people think deeply and critically about what they're looking at, just as any other form of art would be. When we talk about how we live and dress every day, people tend to lean to fluency because it's easy, it's comfortable, and it reduces cognitive load. And one of the things I noted for South by Southwest, and it was quite awesome for the time it actually came out, was right after Fashion Week, New York Times did an entire article for March 4th that was, why do all fashion designers dress alike? And so these are some of the images, and they noted that there was a preponderance of navy sweaters or tops and dark pants or dark jeans and these very kind of dark colors. And that contrasts hugely with their shows of what they had produced to walk down the runway. And the answer is actually that they're protecting their own cognitive capacity. So when we dress for fluency, one of the things we're trying to do is preserve cognitive capacity. And I mean, sometimes we're doing it just to fit in and have safety involved or to reduce decision fatigue. It's exactly what a lot of fashion designers do. When you're putting on a show, that's an incredibly cognitively demanding task. Their brain is at work nonstop, making sure everything is going well and all the puzzle pieces are in place. And in a chaotic background of all of this going on, it's easy for them to preserve their own cognitive capacity if they dress in a way that reduces their own cognitive load and the cognitive load of anybody seeking them out. And so that's one way they do it. So I think also another important thing to note is that something that is considered pretty distinctive now or pretty novel might actually 10 years from now be considered fluent. So there's a really interesting research phenomenon that is familiarity cues positivity. So once we start seeing something on the runway or that designers are putting out, those things, if we see them over and over and over again, we start to think about them as being more present, and we start to think about them as being more positive and more available. And once that happens, something that used to be distinctive can actually migrate to be considered fluency. And that's a lot of times how mass adoption of fashion trends happens.
Yeah, I think a lot about what role context must play in this. And I think, especially with seeing so much stimulation online, I assume our ability to become familiar with things speeds up as well. I think um, we as a team have also recognized that people, especially during this time, are really seeking out more comfortable, more familiar things. And I think, like design aesthetics, which is what Hallie puts out, what Hallie works on, we had a design aesthetic last season, I think it was, that was called Refamiliar, that kind of even speaks to this. I think we've kind of switched a little bit from like just putting something really wild and novel out there to something that is more, or making space to sort of bring a fresh look to the familiar. So I think this is maybe one way we as creative people are trying to negotiate this. But can you talk about how a little bit more about like how context might affect where you sit on the scale, whether it's like modern factors like the internet, or like even just like the modern concept of irony, and maybe the way you express yourself not exactly matching up to how you actually feel and things like that? Or do you think that where you are or where you should be as a creator on the scale kind of depends on the task?
Yeah, I think as a creator, it's really interesting because I mean, I want to say you should follow whatever, wherever your heart's taking you, wherever your design aesthetic and passion is taking you. And I think there's a space for a lot of different variety when it comes to that. And I know a lot of designers are also concerned about like this is great, but if I produce the outfit on the right here, I'm inducing cognitive overload, and there might not be a market for that. So I think it's okay to understand that where we are on that spectrum between fluency and distinctiveness is very context dependent. We can migrate from one end one day to the other end the next day, and that's okay. And that it does depend on a lot of factors. So one of the things you mentioned is a lot of emphasis on comfort right now, and that has a lot to do with the economy. So back when the pandemic hit, there was a massive sale of sweatpants, athleisure, a lot of comfort clothes. And I think that that's happening again because of the economy. So when people feel stress, they lean toward comfort. And that might be something that's a little bit different for each of us, but generally speaking, those are clothes that are a little bit looser, more forgiving materials, colors that are a little bit more muted. But as you discussed, there can be modern takes on that. And so we might see comfort clothes, but designed with slightly modern takes, different cuts. Perhaps a new pattern emerges, different colors become popular every season. So small updates can still keep you on the fluency end, but migrate you a little bit toward distinctiveness, where you might consider it, a little bit more fashion forward, a little bit more modern, a little bit more up to date.
I also,
And
oh, go ahead.
nope, go ahead.
I mean, I also wonder what the role marketing plays in all this because I did attend a few talks that were about, the neuroscience of marketing. And it seems a lot of those proven tactics are about getting people's attention, even if like the image may be a little bit unpleasant. Also, I feel like a reoccurring theme in those talks is how getting the audience to do the work, some of the work for you, like filling in the blanks and all that. So not making it exactly easy for them to process it can increase memorability or just the ability to hold someone the attention of that person. So I also wonder, is it if you are creating a design that's more on that fluency side, if maybe you practice more of the distinctiveness on the marketing side. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. They're leaning into all of these tactics of brain hacking essentially, which we've known these tactics for decades and they work because they're backed and verified by science. They're predictable. And if you're in a marketing, that's what you want. You want something that's going to be predictable as far as increasing sales and every other metric you're interested in. So when you are engaging in distinctiveness, that slows the brain down and requires it to process. And the more cognitive effort somebody has to put into something, the more likely they are to remember it. So that's exactly what they're talking about with making the consumer put in a little bit more effort, a little bit more work in thinking about it. And then the repeatability comes in. If somebody sees something marketed to them over and over and over again, that's where the familiarity comes in. That familiarity cues positivity. So just by virtue of seeing something over and over and over again, a consumer is more likely to want that. And if you are on the distinctiveness or on the fluency side, yeah, you can make something a little bit more distinctive, as I said, with a different cut, different pattern. But there's another marketing hook there that's brain-based, and that is if you're marketing something on the fluency end, you can actually tap in and hack into the emotional brain. So a lot of times you market to things like warmth, comfort, security, happiness, things like that that really play into the emotional attachment somebody will have with that fluency item that they just might not be able to have with something that's a meat dress.
I love that. So on that note, I love this last quote here, just to leave the audience with, if you go to fashion isn't just visual design, it's cognitive design. I think you gave us a lot to think about today. If you want to go to the next slide, if anyone has, I feel like we got a couple different comments in the chat. If anyone wants any information wants to learn more about this, this is Dr. Collins's contact information. And thank you so much for joining us today and for such an inspiring talk.
Thank you. And if anyone wants, any of these materials, just drop your contact info with the QR code, and I'll be happy to send you out a nice packet of materials about this information. Thanks so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you all today.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. Really appreciate it. Amazing. All right.
We can move on to Layla, actually.
All right. Layla, I'm gonna go to your first link.
Well, yeah, hi everyone. It was so great to be back at another South by Southwest. And thank you again, Heather, for sharing your presentation. I feel like the great thing about the event is that there's like so much to go to, but you end up missing so much. So I'm like ecstatic to get to see that today. But to jump into my first link, I sat in on linguist and author Adam Alexik's talk that was called Vibe Shift: How New Media Upended Our Ideas and Aesthetics, where he explored how AI is reshaping the way that we speak and how algorithms are really pushing eye-catching trends like Labubus or Dubai chocolate bars, effectively acting as co-authors of culture. And he noted that while this influence is largely unavoidable online, the best way to really understand what people truly care about and are interested in is to step away from the screen and experience the world firsthand. So that idea really resonated with me as I try to kind of tune out the noise of social media and really rely on my own perspective on the world to identify emerging trends. So I just found that presentation to be very insightful. Jumping to the next link. Fandoms also seem to kind of be a big recurring topic with companies and brands exploring strategies to engage fans in deeper ways. So, for one, I got to experience this activation, which is this new device from Field Tech and Hollow Live that uses haptic technology to allow fans to experience physical sensations like heartbeats that are transmitted from artists as they perform. So, it was essentially this wand device that you hold in one hand, and then this ball item that you'd hold, and the wand would light up, and then the ball would vibrate like a heartbeat. And it was honestly a really odd experience to to feel, but I could definitely see a market for it, especially as fandoms grow to be a lot more passionate. And then for the next link, there was
This one looks like an evolution of like the Wii remote. It's like the
oh yeah,
haptic Wii remote almost.
yeah, I'm like it's like immersive. It's like
Yeah,
times 10 on the Wii remote. I honestly miss that so much. But
me too.
the next one, there was a lot of talk about sports fandoms, and I got to listen to Senior Vice President of the WNBA talk about how they support fans by expanding access points both online and offline to make sure they can easily engage with their favorite teams. And then, in the context of the WNBA specifically, they spoke about how creating spaces that feel inclusive is really important, which we also explore in our Sports in the Spotlight report. So, if you guys want to dive into that a little bit more, feel free to do that. Um, and then our next little bit of info was this a lot of these like immersive tech activations that came up. And the first one really stood out to me. It's from Kinfolk Tech. And it's basically this like Pokemon Go-esque app that helps users discover artistic digital versions of significant but often overlooked historical monuments that tell the stories of Black and Brown communities. So I love that this is kind of something where you'll see something unique in a different location, and they also collab with different artists, so you get to see their works in a unique way too. So I thought that was super fun. Um,
This is
this,
really cool. It's also really gorgeously designed.
I know I'm like obsessed with it. During the presentation, I was like, I need to look up all these artists after.
Yeah, this one's really cool.
Yeah.
You downloading this?
And the next one is from artist Gabo Aurora. And they presented this project that's called The Great Dictator, which allowed participants to kind of place themselves into archival footage of historic speeches by having them recite a 90-second excerpt from a teleprompter, while an AI generated crowd would react with cheers and the occasional silence based on the speaker's words and tone. So, both of these, this one and the one that I just shared, really kind of immersing people in history in unique ways. And I'm always really interested in using technology to learn more about the past. So I thought this was super cool. And I wish I had a chance to stop by this one. But yeah. Then There's like two other ones here, or no, the last one here. I'll skip two.
Oh, mm.
Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Um, I got a chance to listen to this talk about the importance of accessible technology, not just for individuals with disabilities, but as something that ultimately benefits everybody. And I heard from the CEO of XR Navigation, that uses a inclusive digital map through the use of visuals, audio, and tactile elements and text to kind of make digital maps more accessible, particularly for people with low vision, but obviously help is helpful for everyone else in the process too. So, um, really just loved all the immersive uses of tech that were at the event.
Cool.
And then into some fun events that we got to experience. I'm sure we've all heard something about an analog trend at some point this year, and it definitely, there was no shortage of it at South by Southwest. But I stumbled upon this fairly new stationery store called Tomo Mags that was collaborating with Noema magazine. And it was really cool because they had this huge wall of their magazines there. So I got a chance to kind of flip through them versus the usual scrolling on my laptop. So that was really nice. And then later on, they also had an analog party, which you guys are seeing some images from. But they featured conversations with local artists and musicians where they talked about how they use analog practices in their work. And they also held a block printing workshop at the same time to kind of give attendees a chance to engage their creativity in a tangible way.
So cute.
Yeah, the space is super nice too, and all the employees were super sweet. So that was super fun. And then we also got to go to this party. I kind of dragged Navara along with me. Um, but it was basically NYMFET alumni's party. And if you're not familiar with them, they're actually a fashion podcast. And they threw this event to celebrate being nominated for a iHeart Podcast Award. And I really wanted to go because they were having this artist, Quiet Light, DJing there, and I really enjoyed their music. But to our surprise, it was also a collab with Angels Herbal Cigarettes. So they were giving out merch and matchboxes and cigarettes, and it just felt like a really cool retro and a little bit nostalgic atmosphere. So I'm glad that we got to kind of do some field research there a little bit.
This was kind of a trip for me, and I think like a good look into, as someone of another generation, an interesting peek into Gen Z culture. We did a consumer report, I think last year, about called Temperance and Transgression, just kind of looking at how um, this concept of like controlled vices. And I think it's interesting that, while we've been led to believe Gen Z doesn't drink, they're very health focused, things like that. This party, most of the people were outside smoking these herbal cigarettes because they had it was like, what is it, like Mary Kate's wedding where there's like trays of cigarettes out for people just to take and smoke outside. And, granted, these are herbal, so they're a little bit healthier than pure tobacco cigarettes. But I thought it was really interesting to kind of see where these like different lines are being drawn. And I think a lot of it also, like just looking at the like all the aesthetics around this party also feels like maybe a little bit of an aesthetic motivation as well, which is smoking cigarettes does look cool sometimes.
I mean, the merch is really, really cute.
Yeah, I snagged the pink one, so I was so
Yeah,
happy. I think the fact that they're also herbal cigarettes is like perfectly speaking to that too, where it's like this balance.
yeah,
Um,
that's healthy.
right, right. I'm gonna skip to my last thing so that we have time to hear from Mallory still, but I'll just share this Nikon activation that me and Navarre also got to experience. I feel like there was a lot of activations that were dedicated to helping creators kind of hone their craft and learn their skill a little bit better. And Nikon basically had this pop-up space where you could get a free headshot. And they also held these workshops throughout the week to teach people different photography skills. And they even gave us like these free camera straps and like technology charger bags and stuff. So I just think it's super cool to like actually help people learn something and like give things away that are actually going to help them become better professionals. But yeah, that's about it for me.
So cool. Sounds like a really, really eventful week. So thank you, Layla.
Yeah, me and Layla tried taking a number of headshots, or we took advantage of a number of headshot opportunities, and I can't say that they actually worked out so well.
Amazing. All right, Mallory, super excited to hear from your perspective.
Okay, great. I'm super excited to share. I am Mallory, Director of Beauty and Wellness here at FS. And because I recently relocated to Austin myself, the culture team kind of adopted me for those few days to South by Southwest. And it was so cool to, first of all, download all their tips and experience with the show and kind of see the show through their eyes, but also for me, from a beauty and wellness perspective, to branch out and see, what's the beauty scene here, what are the activations, what brands are being highlighted, and I was really pleasantly surprised. So beginning with death, my first link. Let's start at the end. Death is interesting. Death wellness is interesting. It's something we've covered several times in our Future of Wellness annual report. We've approached it from a lot of angles. So I was really curious to go to this panel about how death became the new wellness frontier. Um, there were, I mean, not too many novel concepts to my trend spotting eyes, just because we've called out a lot of the things they discussed already, from death doulas, and the concept of grief care needing to extend to things beyond grieving the end of a physical life, like maybe you're grieving the end of a life stage, or, something, anything else, whatever you're grieving, like the expansion of the concept of grief. However, something that I thought was really interesting that this panel touched on, again, not novel in and of itself, but I think it is quite important, is how we talk about death with children, number one, and the panel had really interesting thoughts on that. And also the idea of, because that came up through Darnell Lamont Walker, if you want to go to the next link, because he writes for kids TV shows. And so, but he's also a death doula. And so this is his new book, Never Can Say Goodbye. And he had so many interesting thoughts about, you know, what you do say and what you don't say. And then another really interesting thing was about the bereavement conversation within the workspace, not just the concept of leave. That's, a pretty old conversation, but the idea of like bereavement return, like there need to be bereavement plans for employees and they can decide how they want their interactions to go. For example, are there certain tasks that can be offloaded from them for a period of time? Are there certain subjects they don't want to be included on, et cetera, et cetera? It was just really interesting. So a few definitely cool death takeaways from the death panel. And also, if you go into my next link, Hallie, there was a cool event I wasn't able to go to, but it was this like grief camp. And this was really cool. I was looking into these two creators. They do these like sad hours in grief camp, and this is becoming a new thing where, you consumers are kind of getting to, I would call it kvetching, but you're getting coming together to maybe talk about more heavy topics, to find some support at frustrating or, sad or heavy moments in your life, so kind of taking the concept of happy hour and flipping it to maybe some of the not so fun moments in our lives. But I think that's cool because community and socialization is such a big takeaway of the last several years, for just wellness perspective. So I loved the idea that we can still move forward with heavy subjects in a social way. So moving on from death, the FQ Lounge is really cool. I don't have many links from here, except for the book that I grabbed. They had They had like a all female authored library where you could go up and take a book, some self-help, some, personal memoirs. I snagged this one, the Second 50. I'm so excited to read it. This reminds me of a book that came out a few years ago by Liz Earle of the eponymous beauty brand called Better Second Half, I think is the name. Basically, all this, amounts to we're living longer than ever. As women, our bodies, are go through so many changes, and how do you take that like second portion of your life and make it feel as meaningful as the first? Basically, women, the old saying is that women become invisible more or less after a certain age, and so this is all about how you can kind of reclaim that from a biological and just mental and emotional perspective. But yeah, the FQ Lounge was really fun, just from an experiential standpoint. It was super well done. They had a glam bar that was co-sponsored by Shopify, and so you could get your hair done, makeup done. They had samples of Goodles that were being passed around, much to my delight. They had, so many little drink bars. They had one sponsored by Bloom with the amazing electrolyte caffeine packets, as well as like a full bar. You could get a nice little matcha. They had a life-saving little booth where you could get like minis of like ibuprofen, tampons, like Tylenol, like whatever you need, like little handbag, like personal care, medical, like health and wellness stuff. That was amazing. And also phone chargers, which was a real lifesaver for me. So they just really thought of the experience of anyone coming to the space. So I really appreciated that.
They also had offered custom embroideries for like even the free merch they were giving out, and also they had like denim jackets. And I don't know what boutique they partnered with, but you could buy something and get it embroidered too. But they were one of several activations we went to that offered custom embroidery, which I thought was really interesting.
Nice.
Yeah, they were gorgeous and so cute, but those denim jackets were $100, and I'm like, do I need another denim jacket embroidered with my name for $100? But yeah, they look so cute. I saw a lot of them on the rack. Um, Moving on to my next link. So Halo House was another activation. It was a street pop-up activation, all beauty and wellness brands. I just want to spotlight two that kind of sparked my interest from that activation. Tano Skincare. I don't know if anyone remembers last year, the viral moment of the high value male morning routine. His morning routine that went viral a year ago, and at the end of it, he takes a banana peel and he like rubs it against his skin because there is like a kind of comparable, not really, but there are beneficial actives in banana skin. This is true. It's not actually like retinol, but it's good. It's a great active for you. And so here we have a skincare brand based on using banana and banana peel skin as its hero active ingredient. Loved their branding, loved their packaging, and their products. So they were super fun to talk to. So I just thought that was interesting, and they have a cool story as well. So definitely excited to see where they go with banana skincare. And then the next one that sparked my interest from this was Drift Peptides. Obviously, peptides have been a huge conversation. I just read today that the FDA is approving some more peptides to hit the market. This is really where longevity is going right now. And these are oral spray peptides, which I thought was quite interesting. And so they're super, super new. But yeah, loved their little activation. They had like a little personalized thing where you could answer some lifestyle questions and get your daily dose recommendation. And if you were lucky enough, like the person literally in front of me, you could win a full size. But alas, I do not have that luck. So I can scroll through their site. But yeah, they were cool. So really interested to see kind of how the supplement conversation is shifting. It might be something that you spray, or even like we've seen nasal sprays as well for supplements, which is really interesting. So definitely moving away from the kind of vitamin like pill fatigue that we've been seeing. Moving on, just quickly through my last few links. She Collab, loved this one. So many cool brands. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. You can actually go to the PhD Feminine Health one first. Um, this is a cool brand. Creatine, obviously, a huge conversation within active, longevity, women's health, so many, but PhD is a women's health focused brand. This is one of their newer products, is creatine specifically for menopause relief. So just an interesting spin because obviously we need all the support we can get as we age. And this has been such a huge part of the longevity conversation. So I thought that was an interesting one. Moving on to actually go to Over the Bloody Moon, Hallie. So Over the Bloody Moon and Bonafide had a joint stand. It was super cool. Over the Bloody Moon is like a menopause awareness and education group, and so they were at the Bonafide stand. Bonafide is a health and wellness women's supplement brand, but their whole theme for the booth was, experiencing menopause. They have these vests that men can put on, or if you're not in menopause yet, you can put on and experience what a hot flash is like physically. And so that was kind of an interesting and clever tie-in to have Bonafide's supplements for menopause and hot flash relief, but also this really kind of cheeky, tie-in where, here's what it's like. It's a serious issue. So I thought that was really interesting and just learning about them as an organization. They do a lot of fun stuff. So I thought that was really, yeah. So you can see in the back here, experience the hot flush with the Menovest trademark. And so let's see what else from She Collab. Da, da, da. Let's see. Actually, we can leave with the last one. So French breakfast. This was a really charming event put on and on Friday the 13th. What a way to start the day. And basically it was just a marketing brand and events brand that put this on. But the speaker they had, if you go to the next link for us all to listen to with our delightful croissants, was Ushi Patel. And her, I've heard a lot of self-help and finding your identity and kind of like corporate personal guidance talks before. We've all heard several of these in the past, but this one I actually thought was really interesting. The way she talks about kind of centralizing your identity and defining your identity clearly as a way, not only within the professional space, but the personal sphere to strengthen your sense of self, not just your sellable personal brand, but just your sense of self. It was interesting because, normally these types of conversations are all about defining who you are in an elevator pitch sort of a way. Like, how can I sell myself? How can I network better? But this was really blending kind of coherence and cohesion of your signature identity, and how that will inherently make business conversations easier. So I thought it was interesting. And we got the book for free with this, so I'm definitely reading my way through it. And so I've got my library haul from South by is like this giant stack of like menopause, women's health, self-help books. If someone came to my apartment right now, they'd be like, "Are you having a crisis or something?" Because it's like all self-help, but all good stuff and so many interesting authors to dive into. So, but yeah, it was so amazing, so fun. What a hustle and bustle. Also, South by is in this like transitional year because they knocked down the convention center, so a lot of running around between the different hotels, but had a blast with Layla and Navara. So thanks for letting me tag along, guys.
I actually
Amazing.
included a couple links in there for covering the movies or the film and the music section. So we'll send that out in the recap, but couldn't get to that today.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you so much, team. That was a great recap. And like, thank you again to Dr. Heather Collins for joining us. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining. And we'll see you next month for our next edition of Show and Tell. Thanks, everyone.